This video has come about following a DM I got on Instagram asking for a bit of advice about photography. And basically what they said in that DM is I've become obsessed with the learning side of things. From YouTube videos that I've consumed, so much information that I can't seem to go out and take photos without overthinking everything. And that got me thinking, because that was me. That was me 12 years ago. That was me 7 years ago. That was me 2 years ago. Eventually, I just got to the point where I had to stop and ask myself, why am I doing this? And that brings us to this video. Overconsumption isn't a new thing. When I started photography, I had stacks of books and magazines I looked to work my way through every single day. In 2025, watching endless tutorials, gear reviews, and following our favourite creators on social media makes overconsumption a really easy trap to fall into, feeding procrastination rather than creativity. We can easily convince ourselves that we're expanding our knowledge, learning new techniques, and getting ourselves ready to make the leap into being a full-blown creative wizard. But we're lying to ourselves, it's all bullshit. And for a long time, I didn't have a bullshit detector. I just carried on in the blind belief that this is what being a photographer is. But what it really is our way of dealing with the fear that we don't think we're good enough. Consumption creates this false sense of productivity without us having to deal with the fact that maybe, just maybe, we're a little bit scared. You keep learning and you think you keep getting better, but you don't, you just know more. But change doesn't always equal change. I've worked as a photographer and filmmaker now for over a decade, so I've always been creative, but that wasn't really the issue. The issue was that it was always creativity for someone else. In the spaces in between my work, I continued those consumption binges to feel like I was being productive in my own personal creativity. But that consumption didn't provide me with any lasting value, and that's where my personal sense of fulfillment and purpose really comes from. I loved working with Nigel Danson, and whilst we made some awesome stuff together, it never quite scratched the itch that was my personal desire to make something of my own, something with the potential to be helpful to many. I guess working with others just felt like going through the motions a bit, and I knew something had to change. I wasn't dissatisfied with what I was doing, and I'm incredibly proud of some of the stuff we made. My issue was with consumption, overcreation, and crucially, my lack of action. Fog's going now, which is a shame. Consumption left me feeling satisfied, but only ever temporarily. There was no personal growth or fulfillment in there, and that's what I was after. I knew that creating could give a more lasting impact. These days, I do have a bullshit detector, so I'm not going to lie to you and say this is easy, because it's really not easy. But it is possible. And once you start down that path of consistent creativity, it is better than you could imagine it to be. Turns out the fog's just moved up a bit, so there's still a little bit hanging around here. Really annoying thing about this scene is these posts, they go straight through where this tree's fallen, which is a real shame because, I mean, that's a lot of Photoshop and I'm not sure. There's quite a lot to take out. So I've got closer to simplify the scene. So I'm actually taking the shot from about here. And I think that's really nice. I'll show you that now. Creativity only ever comes from doing, not from learning. I often come back to the concept that action leads to motivation and not the other way around. When we create, we look to improve. And then when we improve, we create again. And that cycle is so much more productive than the consumption one. So we need some steps to help us break our consumption habits. And these are some things that have worked for me. Firstly, set clear goals around your consumption and maybe set time limits and block off certain times for it so that your consumption is more intentional rather than just mindlessly falling back into it in quieter moments of the day. Secondly, curate your feeds and only follow people that are actually providing you value and inspire you. So hit subscribe below, I guess. Ask yourself why you're doing it. Is this helpful or is this being productive? Every single app on my phone where I use it for consumption is in a folder titled, "Is this productive?" So it automatically triggers my mind to think, am I doing this for the right reasons? And finally, the nuclear option is just delete all the apps from your phone. Doesn't have to be forever, but just until you get on top of your consumption habits. But when breaking or changing a habit, we need to replace it with something else. And that something else is creativity. I'm going to talk about how to switch into a creating first mindset shortly. Before I carry on, if you enjoy this kind of stuff and you want to learn more from me, you can sign up to my weekly newsletter in the link below. Fog's lifted to quite an annoying height now, so I'm not sure how much photography is left. I'm also aware that my backpack does keep appearing and reappearing. Whenever I've fallen into a pattern of consuming over creating, it's generally because I felt a bit shit about myself. Now, I've no idea what the roots of your consumption habits are, but maybe if I talk about mine, it might help you to trace yours back. And I find that tracing things back often helps us to understand them and therefore deal with them a bit easier. I had pretty low confidence in my abilities as a creative for a long time, and I'd often find that the amount of learning I was doing was in direct correlation to how bad I was feeling about myself. I learned an awful lot, and it's probably been helpful to me over the years, but it never helped me grow. It took me a while, but last year I took a deep dive into why I had such low confidence in my creative abilities. And it turned out that despite a really strong desire to be a photographer and a filmmaker, I had this belief that it wasn't a proper job. To the extent where when people asked me what I did, I'd always finish that sentence with, but it's not a proper job. And I worked out where that came from. And that came from some very poor career guidance when I was a teenager. And I've not heard those words uttered for well over 20 years. Yet that's something that stayed with me, and it's stayed with me as a belief. And I've almost just always been waiting for myself to fail at this. And if that's how I feel about it, then why would I dive headfirst in putting all my efforts into making it a success? That might not make sense because I had these two parts of me that were pulling at each other. One saying, this isn't going to work out, you're going to end up doing something else. And this other one that had this deep desire and belief to make it success. And that's what's caused me all this strife, I suppose, over the last decade when it comes to my work. Just knowing and understanding that, though, gave me the power to change that belief. And here I am now, a year later, in a completely different frame of mind. And I've never been as creatively fulfilled or grateful for what I'm doing as I am now. Despite my fairly quick turnaround, it can take a long time for this to happen. Changing habits and changing beliefs takes a lot of work, and I feel like I was banging on the door of change for so many years before it finally opened. Now, I'm not suggesting people just stop consuming, because that's not going to happen, and it would also highly impact my millions of dollars of ad revenue. But what we can look to do is aim for a bit more balance. And what I've done over the last 12 months is aim for a create first mentality, and I'll consume with a lot more intention. And it's often when I'm trying to learn something or improve something. And then once I've improved or learned the thing, I try and implement that into my creativity rather than going on a consumption binge and putting more information into my already overflowing brain. Something I have tried to do is limit my consumption using screen time and time limits for apps. But because I'm more of an all or nothing kind of guy, I found I turned them off within, well, just days of turning them on. Now, before we come on to the end boss of this game, which is actually making something, I want to address the less than helpful excuses our brains come up with. The first one being not enough time. I'm going to hazard a guess that you probably do have some time and it's just allocated properly. I don't know everyone's individual situation, but this is an excuse I used all the time. When I looked at the amount of time I was sat consuming, it didn't stack up. What I did was all sorts of things, and I handily spoke about them in this video, about thinking you've not got enough time, which is linked there. The second famous excuse is I need better gear. And this can be filed under not believing you're good enough yet. I get it, sometimes we do need new gear, but I think a lot of the time our want for new gear is directly tied to our confidence in our own skills as photographers, filmmakers, creatives. So use what you've got, because no matter what you are using, I've got absolutely no doubt in my mind that incredible things can be created with it. The third one, my personal favorite, is I'm not ready yet. No, you're not. And do you know what? You'll never be ready. So stop thinking that and get to work. The photo I took at the start of that segment was just for show for the video. It's actually a terrible picture. I think we can probably fire this one under needs better conditions. Now I know what you're thinking. You like what I've said, you feel inspired to get up and start creating something, which is absolutely amazing, brilliant. But I also know that when you finish watching this video, you are probably going to watch another video. Do not do that, unless it's one of mine, of course. Whatever you do, when this video finishes, leave a comment below saying what you're going to do, because accountability works. But when you finish this video, close your laptop, turn off your phone, and do something. And if you're wondering, what should I do? Try one of these things. Set yourself a challenge or a project. It could be a daily photo or a weekly photo. It could be a project based on a specific area or around a single scene. As an example, I've started shooting a local bridge and plan to take the same shot in all sorts of different conditions across the year. A great example of this is Ryan Harris, who's created an unbelievable body of work just photographing a single tree near to where he lives.
It's located on a work route of mine, and I spent 2 years driving past, not taking a single photograph. It's a thing of beauty when you can see something with your own eyes and not feel compelled to take a photograph. You can enjoy that. One day I did decide to stop to see a huge sunset sky roaring behind the tree, and I had the camera in the car and I stopped. I legged it to the field and took some photographs, and I'm so glad I did, because that has started a 3-year-long project and ongoing project which documents the changing skies and weather systems over a single subject.
Maybe you could restrict your gear and see where that leads. And restricting things like that often leads to greater creativity. And this is a lot easier if you always have a camera on you. So normalize having an everyday camera. Batch create. I've been doing this as part of my daily reels project. I don't want to make a reel every single day. So I'll batch it up and make 5, 6, 7 at a time, and do that once, maybe twice a week. This can be done for anything like editing, blogging, making videos for YouTube. There's so many things that can be batched that we don't necessarily think about. Have deadlines for yourself. Since I set myself the target of releasing a YouTube video every week and an Instagram reel every day, I don't think about whether to create or not now. It takes away that choice, and I just do it without that friction of, should I do this today? That is action leads to motivation in action. Also, be accountable. I just said to the world that I'll put a YouTube video out every week this year, and I'll put out 365 Instagram reels this year. I've now got to save myself from that public humiliation by actually doing it. Make it easy. That's the key to creating consistently. Just make it as easy as possible. If it's hard, it's not something you're going to want to do. So at some point, you're going to stop doing it. I'm not saying to everyone that you've got to create a YouTube video every week or an Instagram reel every day, because that's just not realistic. Try and use positive feedback loops to your advantage. If something feels good or goes well, do more of it and ride that creative wave. You'll keep making improvements, getting better, and that creative streak will take you on quite a journey. It can open doors and create opportunities for you that you have no idea exist. I've got contacts now all over the world, and it is all through doing this. Desk job Rick of 10 years ago had no idea this was possible. Back to my time working with Nigel. I still work with Nigel now, but I prioritise my own stuff rather than his. And he's fine with that. In fact, that's what he told me to do. He's been telling me to do this for years, but because I'd not dealt with the factors behind my rampant consumption, I wasn't in a place where I could actually do it. He's been a constant supporter of what I do, a big believer in what I can do, and a huge inspiration of letting go of all this bullshit that I've just talked about. So I just wanted to give him a huge thank you. If you've got no idea who I'm talking about, I've linked to his channel below and the series that we filmed together in Luscantire, which is by far and away some of the best stuff that both of us together as a team have done. So maybe you don't have to give up whatever it is you're doing to chase this creative dream. You just have to start and then see where that goes. Before I go, drop a comment below and let me know what you're going to do when you finish watching this. It could be blocking out time in your calendar for a shoot, it could be planning a challenge or a project, but just remember that progress and the process is more important than perfectionism. So go out there and do something. We'll start that again.